The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, though nobody on Earth would remember that small detail later. What they would remember was the moment everything changed. Jake Morrison stood in the White House Situation Room, staring at the decoded signal that had been bouncing through space for 3 weeks before humanity's satellites finally caught it. The message was simple and direct. The Galactic Council knew Earth existed, and they wanted to talk. "This is real," said Amy Bennett, her colonel's uniform crisp, despite the early hour. She had been pulled from a training exercise in Nevada to join this emergency meeting. Our linguists confirmed it. The mathematical patterns, the star charts, the technology required to send this. It's all legitimate. President Claire Hudson sat at the head of the table, her face calm but her fingers drumming softly against the wood. She had been in office for only 8 months, and now she faced a decision that would define humanity's future. Around her sat the Joint Chiefs, the science advisors, and the diplomatic corps. Everyone looked worried. "What do they want?" Claire asked. Dr. Ryan Palmer adjusted his glasses and pulled up a holographic display. The scientist had spent 72 hours analyzing the message with his team. They're offering contact, a formal introduction to what they call the Galactic Council. According to this, there are over 900 species in the known galaxy, all working under a unified government structure, and they're just now noticing us? Amy asked, skepticism clear in her voice. Ryan nodded. "We developed faster-than-light communication last year. That must have triggered something in their detection systems. Before that, we were just another primitive world to them." Jake stepped forward. He had been Earth's top diplomat for 6 years, negotiating treaties and handling international crises. But this was different. This was beyond anything he had trained for. "Mr. President, we need to respond. Ignoring them isn't an option. If they found us, others will too. We need to know what we're dealing with." Claire looked around the room. Opinions? The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for caution, others for aggression. Some wanted to hide. Others wanted to announce humanity's presence with pride. But in the end, Claire made the decision that would set everything in motion. "We meet with them. Jake, you'll lead our diplomatic team. Amy, you'll serve as military advisor. Ryan, you'll handle the technical aspects. We go in humble, we listen more than we talk, and we learn everything we can about this council." 3 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of humanity's first deep space vessel, watching as the council station came into view. The structure was massive, built around a neutron star that pulsed with violet light. Ships from dozens of species docked at various ports, their designs ranging from elegant to bizarre. "It's beautiful," Ryan whispered, his scientific mind overwhelmed by the sight. "It's intimidating," Amy corrected, her tactical instincts noting the weapon emplacements and defensive shields. The human delegation was small by necessity. Earth had only managed to build one ship capable of reaching this location, and it was more of a shuttle than a proper vessel. When they docked, they were met by an escort of Zarthic soldiers. The aliens stood nearly 8 feet tall, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Their leader, who introduced himself as Overseer Thelvax, looked down at the humans with barely concealed amusement. "Welcome, humans," Thelvax said, his translator device rendering his words in perfect English. "The council has been waiting. Follow me." The council chamber was enormous. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in curved rows, rising up toward a domed ceiling that showed real-time images of the galaxy. Jake felt very small as he walked to the central platform, flanked by Amy and Ryan. A holographic figure appeared above them. It spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Humanity of Earth, you have been discovered and evaluated. The Galactic Council extends an offer of probationary membership." Jake stepped forward. "We're honored by this offer. What would membership entail?" "Jake." The hologram shifted, displaying a document with thousands of lines of text. "You will accept council oversight of all colonial expansion. You will share all technological developments. You will restrict military operations to your home system. You will pay tribute for access to trade routes. These terms are standard for primitive species entering the galactic community. Amy's jaw tightened, but Jake put a subtle hand up, signaling her to stay quiet. He read through the terms carefully, his diplomatic training keeping his face neutral even as he read requirements that essentially made Earth a servant state. "May we have time to consider?" Jake asked. "You may have one standard cycle," the hologram responded. "But know that refusal is not truly an option. Species that reject council membership are quarantined to their home systems indefinitely. You would be cut off from the galaxy, alone in the dark." Back in their small quarters on the station, the human team gathered to discuss their options. "This is slavery," Amy said bluntly. "They're treating us like children. They're treating us like every other new species," Ryan countered. "I've been reviewing their database. This is standard procedure. Every civilization goes through this probationary period." "Actually, Ryan with crude, Maya no. Actually interstopidar." Jake sat quietly, thinking. He had spent the last few hours talking to other species representatives, the ones from younger civilizations who had joined the council in the last few centuries. What he learned troubled him. The council never promoted species from probationary status. The system was designed to keep new civilizations under control. "We don't have a choice," Jake finally said. "Not yet. We're one world with one ship. They have thousands of worlds and millions of ships. If we refuse, we're trapped in our solar system forever." "So we accept?" Amy asked, anger clear in her voice. "We accept," Jake confirmed. "But we learn. We watch. We prepare. They think we're primitive. Let them keep thinking that." President Claire Hudson received their recommendation and made her decision. Earth would sign the Covenant of Subordinate Species. The news was met with protests on Earth, but most people understood the reality. Humanity was the newcomer to a very old game. The signing ceremony was brief. Jake placed his hand on the digital document, binding Earth to the Council's terms. Overseer Thelvax smiled, a gesture that looked predatory on his alien face. "Welcome to the galactic community," Thelvax said. "I look forward to overseeing your development." As the human delegation prepared to leave, Jake took one last look at the council chamber. The representatives were already moving on to other business. Humanity forgotten as just another minor addition to their empire. But Jake remembered something his grandfather had told him once. The quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. Earth would stay quiet. Earth would learn. And when the time came, Earth would be ready. The ship departed, heading back toward the small blue world that hung in the darkness of space. Behind them, the council continued its business. Unaware that they had just made a mistake, they had given humanity a reason to prepare, and humans were very good at preparation when properly motivated. The galaxy would learn that lesson eventually. But for now, Earth stayed quiet. 15 years passed like water through humanity's fingers, and in that time, everything changed while appearing to stay the same. Jake Morrison, now carrying the title of Senior Ambassador to the Galactic Council, walked through the corridors of the Mars Oversight Station. The facility had been built by the Zarthic Empire, a constant reminder of the Council's presence in humanity's home system. Overseer Thelvax lived here, monitoring every move Earth made beyond its atmosphere. "Another inspection report," said Beth Richards, handing Jake a datapad. She had been promoted to commander 5 years ago, and now served as the liaison between Earth's growing space force and the Council inspectors. "They're questioning the power signatures from our civilian ships again." Jake read through the report. Beth was right to be concerned. The signatures were unusual because those weren't civilian ships, not really. But the Council didn't need to know that yet. "File it with the others," Jake said calmly, "and make sure engineering adjusts the output levels to match standard profiles." Beth nodded and left. Jake watched her go, thinking about how much had changed. When Earth first joined the Council, humanity had one ship and a few dozen people living on Mars. Now there were colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan. Shipyards floated in orbit around Earth and in the asteroid belt. The population beyond Earth had grown to nearly 2 million people. The Council barely noticed. To them, this was normal growth for a primitive species. They didn't see the weapons being built into those civilian ships. They didn't notice that every mining facility could be converted to military production in hours. They didn't realize that humanity's patience had a purpose. The first real provocation came on a cold morning in the belt. Lisa Parker, Earth's trade representative, received notice that the Velnari Collective was claiming ownership of Sector 7, a mineral-rich region where human miners had been working for 8 years. The claim was based on ancient territorial rights that the Velnari had supposedly held for thousands of years. Lisa brought the matter to the Council. She stood in the Great Chamber, presenting Earth's case with careful precision. The human miners had been there first. By modern standards, they had registered their claims according to Council law. They had committed no violations. The Velnari representative, a being that looked like a floating mass of crystalline structures, responded with dismissive tones. Primitive species do not understand the depth of galactic history. Our ancestors claimed this region before your world even developed spaceflight. The claim is valid. The vote was called. 847 council members voted to support the Velnari claim. Only Earth voted against it. Lisa watched as the decision was made. Her face carefully neutral, even as anger burned inside her. She filed her protest officially, knowing it would be ignored, and returned to Earth with the news. President Claire Hudson, now in her 4th term, received the report in the Oval Office. She was older now, her hair gray, but her eyes were still sharp. Sitting across from her was Admiral Ben Crawford, commander of what the Council thought was Earth's small defense fleet. "They're testing us," Claire said simply. "They've been testing us for years," Ben replied. "This is just more obvious. The question is, do we respond? We relocate our people," Claire decided. "We follow their ruling. But we remember, add it to the list." The list had grown long over the years. There was the time Council inspectors had detained human scientists for 3 months on false charges. There was the incident where human ships were fired upon for entering what turned out to be unmarked Council space. There were the trade tariffs that seemed designed specifically to hurt Earth's economy. There were a dozen other small humiliations, each one carefully recorded. Dr. Alex Chen made his breakthrough on a Tuesday in Geneva. The quantum shielding technology he developed could revolutionize space travel and defense. The shield would make ships nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. It was a game changer. Within a week, Council inspectors arrived, demanding to see the research. The Covenant required Earth to share all technological developments. Alex stood in his laboratory, watching as Zarthic scientists downloaded 15 years of his work. "This is theft," Alex said quietly to Jake, who had come to observe the transfer. "This is compliance," Jake replied. "Let them have it. They'll waste years trying to integrate it into their systems. Their technology is too standardized, too old. By the time they figure it out, we'll have moved on to something better." Alex understood. Earth's scientists had been working in secret on dozens of projects. The quantum shielding was impressive, but it wasn't Earth's best weapon. That distinction belonged to technologies the Council didn't even know existed. The mockery was constant and casual. Jake attended Council sessions regularly, and each time he heard the comments, the Zarthic called humans the newest pets. The Velnari referred to Earth as the infant world. Other species simply ignored humanity altogether, as if Earth's representatives weren't worth acknowledging. Jake endured it all with quiet dignity. He took notes. He observed how the Council operated, noting the fractures between different factions, the old rivalries, the political games. He learned which species held real power and which were merely puppets. He studied their military tactics, their technological limitations, their strategic blind spots. Commander Beth Richards continued her inspections of human facilities. Always professional, always thorough. What the council didn't know was that Beth was also inspecting their ships and stations, using sensors that were far more advanced than the council realized. Every time a council vessel docked at a human facility, Beth's team scanned it completely, building a comprehensive database of council military capabilities. The breaking point came without warning, though looking back, everyone should have seen it coming. Governor Dan Foster had built New Boston from nothing. The colony in the Tau Ceti system was humanity's first real settlement beyond the solar system, approved by the council after years of applications and fees. 10,000 people called it home now, living in dome cities and underground habitats. They mined rare minerals, conducted research, and dreamed of the future. The Tsar-Thick battle group arrived on a Wednesday morning. Governor Foster watched from the command center as 15 massive warships took up positions in orbit. No warning had been given. No explanation was offered. "This is Governor Dan Foster of New Boston Colony," Dan said, broadcasting on all frequencies. "You are entering human space without authorization. Please state your intentions." The response came from Admiral Krelnak, his voice cold and mechanical through the translator. "You have violated Council airspace protocols. Your defensive satellites were launched without proper authorization. This is a violation of the Covenant. We are here to correct this violation. Our satellites are defensive only." Dan protested. "They comply with all Council regulations. Your compliance is not for you to determine," Krelnak replied. The bombardment began 30 seconds later. Kinetic strikes hit the satellite network first, destroying it in minutes. Then the weapons turned toward the colony itself. Dan screamed orders, trying to evacuate people to the underground shelters. But there wasn't enough time. The attacks were precise and cruel. The Tsar-Thick targeted residential areas, communication hubs, power stations. 3,000 people died in the first hour. Dan watched helplessly as his colony burned. On the council station, Jake Morrison was in session when the news arrived. He stood abruptly, interrupting a debate about trade regulations. "Mr. Chairman, I have an emergency. The Tsar-Thick Empire is attacking New Boston. Civilian casualties are confirmed. I request immediate council intervention." The chamber fell silent. Then Overseer Thelvax spoke, his voice carrying across the space. "The Tsar-Thick are enforcing council law. There is no emergency." Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. "They're killing civilians. They're correcting a violation," another council member said. "This is standard procedure." The vote was called. Should the council intervene? The result was overwhelming. No intervention. The attack would continue until the Tsar-Thick determined compliance was achieved. Jake looked around the chamber, seeing the indifference on alien faces. He met Thelvax's eyes and saw satisfaction there. This was the final test. Earth was being put firmly in its place. Jake walked calmly back to his quarters. He sent one message to Earth, encrypted with codes the council couldn't break. The message was simple. "They've gone too far." President Claire Hudson received the message in the middle of the night. She read it once, then walked to her secure communication room. She entered a code that had been prepared 15 years ago. A code that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Across human space, in hidden shipyards and secret facilities, Admiral Ben Crawford and his commanders received the same code. Protocol. Midnight. The time for patience was over. Earth had stayed quiet for 15 years. Humanity had learned and prepared. Now they would learn what that patience had been hiding. The council chamber had returned to normal business within an hour of Jake Morrison's desperate plea. Representatives discussed mining rights and trade agreements, while New Boston burned. Jake sat in his designated seat, watching the proceedings with eyes that revealed nothing. Inside, he was counting down the hours. On New Boston, Governor Dan Foster crouched in the command bunker as another explosion shook the walls. The Tsar-Thick ground troops had landed an hour ago, moving through the ruined colony with methodical efficiency. They were seizing infrastructure, rounding up survivors, and broadcasting their dominance across every channel. "We need to surrender," said one of Dan's advisors, a young woman named Kelly, who had helped build this colony from its first foundation. Blood ran down her face from a head wound, and her voice shook with fear and anger. "No," Dan said quietly. "Hold on. Just hold on. A little longer." "For what?" Kelly demanded. "Earth can't help us. The Council won't help us. We're alone." Dan looked at his watch, counting down the minutes. He had received one encrypted message from Earth before the communication arrays were destroyed. The message told him to survive for 12 hours. He didn't understand why, but he trusted the order. Dan Foster hadn't become governor by giving up easily. "We hold," he repeated. "Get everyone deeper into the underground sections. Seal the bulkheads. We can last." Above New Boston, Admiral Krelnock watched the ground operation from his flagship. The human colony was broken, its people scattered or captured. This would serve as an excellent lesson to other primitive species who might think about challenging Council authority. "Bring me prisoners," Krelnock ordered. "We'll execute them publicly. Let humanity see the price of disobedience." His officers moved to obey. None of them noticed the strange readings appearing on their long-range sensors. Space appeared to ripple at the edge of the system, but the sensors dismissed it as natural phenomena. The Zarthik had grown complacent over thousands of years of dominance. They weren't looking for threats, because they couldn't imagine any threat that could challenge them. On the Council station orbiting Kepler 442, Jake Morrison stood and walked out of the chamber during a particularly boring discussion about agricultural quotas. Overseer Thelvax watched him leave with satisfaction. The human had finally been broken. About time. Jake returned to his quarters and changed into a simple black uniform. He checked his watch. 6 hours had passed since he sent his message. 6 more hours until the deadline he had given the Council. He wondered if they would take it seriously. He doubted it. Commander Beth Richards knocked on his door exactly 3 minutes later. She had changed into a similar black uniform, and she carried a locked case. "It's time?" she asked. "Almost," Jake replied. "How many Council security personnel on this station?" 400. "We have 32 humans scattered throughout the facility. It won't be enough." "It will be," Jake said with certainty. "We just need to hold the command center for a few minutes." Across the galaxy, in a dozen secret locations, humanity's true fleet prepared to emerge from hiding. The ships had been built in facilities the Council never inspected, constructed with technologies the Council didn't know existed. For 15 years, humanity had appeared to comply with all restrictions while building the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Ben Crawford stood on the bridge of the EDS Defiance, a battleship that was larger and more powerful than anything the Council had in active service. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment for a decade. "All ships report ready," said Captain Megan Torres, his tactical officer. She was young but brilliant, one of the first generation to be born after first contact. She had grown up knowing humanity was considered inferior. That knowledge had driven her to excellence. "Fleet status?" Ben asked. 400 ships holding position at the edge of the system. Quantum drives charged. Weapons ready. Shields at maximum. Ben looked at the countdown timer on his display. 2 hours until Jake's deadline expired. 2 hours until humanity announced to the galaxy that the time for patience had ended. "Send the message to all ship commanders," Ben ordered. "We jump in 90 minutes. Target: Council Station Kepler 442. Rules of engagement: disable but do not destroy unless fired upon. We're not conquerors, we're teachers." The orders went out through quantum communication channels that the Council couldn't detect or intercept. 400 ships and their crews received confirmation. Humanity was going to war. SS. Back on the Council station, Jake Morrison waited in his quarters as the deadline approached. He had sent his ultimatum to the council leadership exactly 12 hours ago. The message was clear and simple. Withdraw from Tau Ceti, or Earth would consider the covenant void. He had given them time to respond, time to do the right thing. No response had come. At New Boston, Governor Dan Foster watched as Zarthik soldiers dragged prisoners into the main square. He recognized the faces. These were his people, his friends, his responsibility. Through his cracked view screen, he could see Admiral Krelnak's ship broadcasting live footage of the scene. Humanity will watch and learn. Krelnak's voice echoed across every channel. This is the price of defiance. The execution order was given. Dan closed his eyes, unable to watch, but unable to look away. Then, space itself seemed to tear open. The Zarthik sensors screamed warnings as a massive fleet emerged from slipspace directly above New Boston. 400 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their quantum shields making them appear as ghosts on Zarthik targeting systems. What is this? Krelnak shouted, staring at his displays in disbelief. Where did they come from? Admiral Kate Sullivan, commanding the relief fleet, opened communications to all Zarthik vessels. Her voice was calm and cold. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have 60 seconds to release all prisoners and withdraw to minimum safe distance. This is your only warning. Krelnak laughed. You think your primitive ships can threaten us? We are the Zarthik Empire. 50 seconds, Kate replied. The Zarthik battle group turned to engage, confident in their superior numbers and experience. They had fought and won 1,000 battles across the galaxy. These humans would be no different. They were very wrong. At the council station, Jake Morrison's countdown reached 0. He picked up his communicator and sent one word to Beth Richards. Now. Across the station, 32 human personnel moved simultaneously. They had spent 15 years working on this station, learning its systems, mapping its weaknesses. They moved to key locations with practiced precision. Within 3 minutes, they had seized the command center, locked down the communication arrays, and isolated the council leadership. Overseer Thelvax found himself staring at armed humans who had appeared from nowhere. Yes, Jake Morrison agreed, walking into the command center. It is. You tested our patience. This is the result. The station's external sensors suddenly lit up with contacts. Hundreds of them. More ships than should be possible. Thelvax looked at the displays and felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. That's impossible, he whispered. You're a primitive species. You can't have that many ships. We stayed quiet, Jake said. We learned. We prepared. You assumed silence meant weakness. That was your mistake. At New Boston, the Battle of Tau Ceti lasted exactly 8 minutes. The Zarthik battle group, despite their experience and confidence, found themselves completely outmatched. Human rail cannons punched through their shields like they weren't there. Quantum shielding made human ships nearly impossible to target. AI-assisted tactical networks coordinated the Earth fleet with inhuman precision. Admiral Krelnak watched in horror as his ships were systematically disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. The humans were targeting engines and weapons, leaving life support intact. They were winning without slaughter. His flagship shuddered as rail rounds tore through its hull. Emergency klaxons wailed. His crew scrambled to respond, but there was nothing they could do. The humans were simply better. Surrender, came Admiral Sullivan's voice. Your ships are disabled. Your troops will withdraw. The prisoners will be released. Do this now, or we will make your ships into debris. Krelnak looked around his damaged bridge. He saw fear in his crew's eyes, saw the tactical displays showing nothing but defeat. With shaking hands, he gave the order to surrender. On the council station, Overseer Thelvax watched the battle feeds in stunned silence. The mighty Zarthik Empire, defeated in minutes. It was impossible. It shouldn't be possible. Jake Morrison stood beside him, watching the same feeds. Withdraw from Tau Ceti, Jake said quietly. That was the deal. You had 12 hours. You chose war. The Council will destroy you for this, Thelvax said. But his voice lacked conviction. The Council will negotiate, Jake corrected. Because right now, 400 human warships are holding position around this station. You're going to call an emergency session, and you're going to listen. Word spread across the galaxy at light speed. Humanity, the primitive species, the newest pets, had defeated the Zarthic Empire. The quiet world had roared, and the galaxy was listening. 900 species, thousands of representatives, all sitting in stunned silence as they watched the holographic displays showing human warships surrounding their station. The ships hung in space like silent threats, their quantum shields making them shimmer like ghosts. Jake Morrison walked to the center platform, no longer the supplicant but an equal. Behind him stood Commander Beth Richards and Dr. Ryan Palmer, both wearing the black uniforms of Earth's military. Around them, Council security forces stood frozen, uncertain whether to act. 15 years ago, we came here asking for partnership, Jake began, his voice carrying through the massive chamber. You offered us servitude instead. We accepted your terms because we were weak, and you were strong. That has changed. Overseer Thelvax tried to stand, to protest. But Major Nick Harrison, who had led the boarding team, placed a firm hand on his shoulder. The Zarthic official sat back down, his forearms trembling with rage and fear. This is an illegal act, shouted a Velnari representative, their crystalline structure pulsing with agitated colors. You have violated every law of the Council. You will be destroyed for this. Jake turned to face them. With what fleet? The Zarthic battle group at Tau Ceti has surrendered. Your station is surrounded, and Earth's defense fleet is 3 times the size you've seen so far. We have 1,200 warships, built in secret over 15 years. You taught us to be patient. We learned that lesson well. The numbers caused a ripple of shock through the chamber. 1,200 ships. For a species that supposedly had only a small defense force, it was impossible. Yet the evidence hung in space outside the station, undeniable and overwhelming. How? Asked a small alien from a species Jake didn't recognize. The question was genuine, not hostile. How did you hide such a fleet? Dr. Ryan Palmer stepped forward. You assumed we were primitive. You never looked deeper. Every colony we built had hidden shipyards. Every civilian vessel we registered had military capabilities. Every technology you demanded we share, we gave you outdated versions while developing better ones. In secret, you stopped learning centuries ago. We never did. Admiral Ben Crawford's voice came through the station's communication system. He was broadcasting from the Defiance, his image appearing on every screen. People of the Galactic Council, Earth does not seek conquest. We never did. But we will no longer accept oppression. What happened at New Boston was a massacre of civilians. 3,000 innocent people died because we dared to defend ourselves. That ends today. You cannot dictate terms to the Council? Thelvax finally managed to speak, though his voice shook. We have millions of ships across the galaxy. You have shown us 1,200. The mathematics are not in your favor. True, Jake admitted. In a prolonged war, you might win through sheer numbers. But the cost would be enormous. Your infrastructure is spread thin across thousands of systems. Ours is concentrated in one heavily defended location. You have no idea where Earth actually is. Your records show our home system. But we've been feeding you false navigation data for years. You couldn't find Earth if you tried. This revelation caused another wave of shock. The Council's entire structure was based on knowing where every member species lived. Without that knowledge, they couldn't control or threaten anyone. Captain Megan Torres had spent 5 years creating the false data, feeding it slowly into Council systems so it wouldn't be noticed. Earth's actual location was hidden behind layers of misdirection and false trails. The Sol system was there on the star charts, but the coordinates were wrong by several light years. "What do you want?" asked a delegate from the Kryn Federation, a relatively peaceful species that had been under Council control for centuries. The question was asked with curiosity rather than hostility. Jake pulled up a holographic document. President Claire Hudson of Earth has drafted new terms. The Covenant of Subordinate Species is dissolved, effective immediately. Earth receives full Council membership with equal voting rights. All species have the right to self-defense without Council approval. The Council's authority becomes advisory rather than absolute, and there will be tribunals for war crimes, starting with the massacre at New Boston. "Impossible," Thelvax said flatly. "The Council will never agree to such terms. Then you will sit here while your station remains captured," Jake replied. "Your ships cannot approach without risking their destruction. Your communications are under our control. You have no options except to negotiate." At New Boston, Governor Dan Foster walked through the ruins of his colony. Human ships filled the sky now, not attacking but defending. Medical teams were landing, treating the wounded, helping survivors. Admiral Kate Sullivan had brought not just weapons but supplies, doctors, and engineers. "We held them," Dan said to Kelly, his advisor who had survived the bunker. "Earth came for us." Kelly watched as a Zarthik soldier was led past in restraints. The soldier's eyes were downcast, avoiding contact. The mighty warrior who had terrorized civilians now looked small and defeated. They actually did it. They beat the Council. Not beat, Dan corrected. Challenged. There's a difference. Admiral Krelnak sat in the brig of a human ship, his flagship having been towed to a safe orbit. His crew was being held in comfortable but secure conditions. No one had been executed. The humans had even provided medical care for wounded Zarthik soldiers. A human officer entered the brig. It was Captain Steve Morris, who commanded one of the destroyer escorts. He carried a tray with food and water. "I'm your enemy," Krelnak said bitterly. "Why do you feed me?" Steve set down the tray. "Because you're a prisoner of war, not an animal. We have rules about how we treat prisoners. We follow those rules even when our enemies don't." Krelnak stared at the food, then at the human. "You could have destroyed my fleet. You disabled us instead. Why show mercy?" "Because we're not trying to prove we're monsters," Steve replied. "We're trying to prove we're better than what you thought we were. Eat. You'll need your strength for the tribunal." Back at the Council station, the debate had raged for hours. Some species supported Earth's demands. They had been under Council control for centuries, suffering the same restrictions and humiliations that humanity had endured. They saw this as an opportunity for change. Other species were horrified. The Zarthik, the Velnari, and their allies saw this as rebellion that needed to be crushed. They demanded military action, consequences, retaliation, but they were afraid. The human fleet hung in space like a sword over their heads, and intelligence reports coming in from across the galaxy painted an even more troubling picture. Human technology was decades ahead of Council standards. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their defenses impenetrable by conventional means. "If we fight, we lose," admitted a senior Velnari military commander in a closed session. "Not immediately, but eventually. They've been preparing for this for 15 years. We've been stagnant for 15 centuries." President Claire Hudson's face appeared on the main display, broadcasting from Earth. She had waited for this moment, letting Jake and Ben make the initial moves. Now, she would speak directly to the Council. "Members of the Galactic Council," Claire began, her voice firm but not hostile. "Earth doesn't seek your destruction. We seek respect. We asked for it politely, and were denied. We asked for fairness and were mocked. We asked for basic rights, and were exploited. So we prepared ourselves to take what we could not be given freely. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we are not conquerors. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your resources. We want you to recognize that we are your equals, not your servants. We want a council that serves all its members fairly, not one that enforces the will of the powerful on the weak. And if we refuse? Thelvax challenged, though his voice lacked its former arrogance. Then we leave, Claire said simply. We take our technology, our resources, and our people. We seal our borders, and when other species develop space travel and find you, we'll offer them an alternative, a coalition of independent worlds who choose cooperation over domination. How many species do you think will join the Council when they have another option? The threat was clear. Earth wouldn't fight a war of conquest. They would fight a war of ideas. And in a war of ideas, the Council's oppressive structure was vulnerable. You're threatening to dismantle everything we've built, accused a council elder from one of the founding species. Yes, Claire confirmed. Because what you've built is wrong. You've created a hierarchy where old civilizations rule and new ones serve. That's not a partnership. That's tyranny. The vote was called after 14 hours of debate. The question was simple. Accept Earth's terms and reform the Council, or reject them and face the consequences. The result came slowly, species by species. Some voted immediately, others deliberated. When the count was finished, the tally was closer than anyone expected. 512 voted to accept. 387 voted to reject. Earth had won, but barely. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, exhausted but victorious. The Council will reconvene in 30 days to begin implementing reforms. In the meantime, all probationary restrictions on member species are suspended, all pending war crime charges will be investigated, and Earth will maintain its fleet at full readiness until the new structure is in place. Overseer Thelvax was led away in restraints, destined for a tribunal that would examine his actions over 15 years. Other officials who had abused their authority would follow. As the session ended and representatives filed out, Jake received a message from Admiral Ben Crawford. All ships report ready. How does it feel to change the galaxy? Jake smiled tiredly. Ask me in 30 days when we see if they actually keep their word. 5 years had passed since the day humanity announced itself to the galaxy with warships instead of words. Jake Morrison walked through the rebuilt New Boston, marveling at how much had changed. The colony was larger now, more secure, more alive. Where ruins had once stood, new buildings rose toward the alien sky. Governor Dan Foster met him at the Central Plaza, the same square where Zarthik soldiers had once threatened to execute prisoners. Now it was a park, with children playing and adults gathering to talk. A memorial stood at the center, listing the names of the 3,000 who had died during the attack. Strange to be back? Dan asked as they walked. Everything's strange now, Jake admitted. He was older, gray showing in his hair, lines of stress permanently etched around his eyes. But he was also more relaxed than he had been in years. The burden of pretending to be weak was gone. How are the reforms going? Dan asked. Jake sighed. Slowly. But they're happening. The Council voted last month to dissolve the tributary system. Species no longer have to pay for using trade routes. It's a small step, but it matters. They walked past a group of children, human and alien together, playing some game that seemed to involve a lot of running and laughing. 5 years ago, that scene would have been impossible. The Council had strictly segregated species by development level. Now the barriers were coming down, slowly but surely. The Velnari are still causing problems, Jake continued. They've formed a coalition of the older species, trying to preserve their power. But they're losing influence. Too many younger civilizations are standing up for themselves now that Earth showed them it was possible. We changed things, Dan said. It wasn't a question. We forced change, Jake corrected. Whether it sticks depends on what happens next. At the council station, which had been renamed Unity Station in a symbolic gesture, Ambassador Nicole Harper conducted the day's session. She had taken over Jake's role when he finally accepted a much-deserved retirement. Younger and more optimistic than Jake had ever been, Nicole approached the council with firm confidence rather than quiet caution. Today we address the petition from the Kryn Federation, Nicole announced. They request full sovereign status and withdrawal of all council oversight personnel from their systems. The request would have been denied automatically just 5 years ago. Now, it sparked genuine debate. The Kryn were an old civilization, members for over 2,000 years, but they had always been categorized as a subordinate species. Earth's challenge to the Council had inspired them to seek independence. The Kryn have proven themselves capable of self-governance, argued Chris Matthews, Earth's legal expert who now served on the Council's Reform Committee. There is no legal basis to deny their request under the new charter. The Velnari representative, a different individual than the one who had tried to seize Earth's asteroid claims, pulsed with agitated colors. If we grant this, others will follow. The Council will fragment. The Council will evolve, Nicole replied firmly. That's the point of the reforms. We're building a partnership of equals, not an empire of subjects. The vote passed, though not by a comfortable margin. The Kryn Federation was granted sovereignty. They would remain council members, but on their own terms. It was a victory for the principles Earth had fought for. On Earth itself, President Matt Sullivan sat in the Oval Office, reviewing military reports. He had succeeded Claire Hudson 2 years ago, continuing her policies of strength tempered with restraint. The Earth Defense Fleet now numbered 1,800 ships, and humanity's technology continued to advance beyond what the Council could match. Admiral Ben Crawford is requesting retirement, said Vice President Sarah Brooks, reviewing the same reports. He wants to spend time with his family. Can't say I blame him. Matt nodded. Approve it. He's earned it. Who's recommended for replacement? Captain Megan Torres. She led the tactical planning for the Kepler operation. Young, brilliant, and popular with the fleet. The troops trust her. Make it happen, Matt decided. But make sure Ben stays on as an advisor. His experience is too valuable to lose completely. In the Zarthik Empire, things had changed more dramatically than anywhere else. The defeat at Tau Ceti had shattered their reputation as invincible warriors. Their government had fallen in the aftermath, replaced by a more moderate leadership that sought cooperation rather than domination. Former Admiral Krelnak, after serving 3 years in prison for war crimes, had been released and now worked as a military consultant, teaching younger Zarthik officers about the dangers of arrogance and underestimation. He had become an unlikely advocate for reform. We thought we were the strongest, Krelnak said in a lecture at the Zarthik Military Academy. We measured strength in numbers and tradition. The humans measured it in innovation and adaptability. We learned too late that the quietest opponent is often the most dangerous. His students listened carefully. The new Zarthik military was different from the old one. They studied human tactics, learned from human innovations, and approached the galaxy with humility rather than arrogance. It was a painful transformation, but a necessary one. At New Boston, Jake Morrison and Dan Foster reached the edge of the colony, where construction crews were expanding the settlement. Human workers labored alongside aliens from a dozen different species, all working toward a common goal. Do you think it'll last? Dan asked the question that everyone wondered. The peace? The reforms? The change? Jake watched a human engineer explaining something to a Velnari apprentice, both of them gesturing at a holographic blueprint. I think it has to, he said finally. The galaxy saw what happens when humans are pushed too far, but they also saw what happens when humans are treated as equals. We didn't conquer. We didn't slaughter. We forced respect, and then we offered partnership. Some species still hate us, Dan pointed out. Of course they do. We disrupted their comfortable hierarchy. But more species are grateful than angry. The younger civilizations especially. They've been waiting for someone to challenge the old order. We just happen to be the ones strong enough to do it. A message came through on Jake's communicator. It was from Nicole Harper at Unity Station. Jake, we need your advice. The Thorian Collective wants to join the Council, but they're requesting guarantees that they won't be treated like Earth was. How do we handle that? Jake smiled. The Thorians were a recently discovered species, much like humanity had been 15 years ago. They were nervous, cautious, and wise enough to ask questions before signing anything. Tell them the truth, Jake replied. Tell them about the covenant of subordinate species and how Earth endured it. Tell them about the reforms and how we fought for them. Then let them decide if they trust the Council to keep its promises. That's all we can do. You're not worried they'll refuse to join? If they refuse, they have good reason, Jake said. And maybe that'll push the Council to reform even faster. Fear of losing new members is a powerful motivator. As the sun set over New Boston, casting long shadows across the rebuilt colony, Jake and Dan stood together watching the sky. Earth's patrol ships moved overhead, visible as bright points of light. Defensive platforms orbited the planet, ensuring that what happened 5 years ago would never happen again. You know what I think? Dan said. I think we did more than win a battle. We changed the entire conversation. Before Earth, new species joined the Council because they had no choice. Now, they join because they want to. That's the real victory. Jake nodded slowly. We stayed quiet for 15 years. We watched, we learned, and we prepared. The Council thought silence meant acceptance. They didn't realize it meant patience. Ada for the first. And when they tested that patience, we taught them a lesson they'll never forget. Jake looked up at the stars, thinking about all the civilizations out there. Young and old, strong and weak. The galaxy needed to learn that quiet doesn't mean weak. That new doesn't mean inferior. Dan smiled. Think they've learned? Most of them, Jake replied. The smart ones learned fast. The stubborn ones are still learning. And a few will probably never understand. But that's okay. We're not trying to change everyone. We're just trying to make sure humanity has a voice that can't be ignored. They walked back toward the colony as the sky darkened. Behind them, the memorial glowed softly, honoring those who had died. Ahead of them, the lights of New Boston shone bright, a testament to human resilience and determination. Somewhere above, Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the defense fleet, ensuring that New Boston and all human colonies remained safe. On Earth, President Matt Sullivan worked with the Council on new treaties and agreements. At Unity Station, Nicole Harper argued for reforms that would benefit all species, not just humanity. The galaxy had changed. Not overnight, not easily, but permanently. Earth had stayed quiet until the moment when silence became impossible, and when humanity finally spoke, they spoke with a voice that commanded respect. Jake Morrison, the diplomat who had endured 15 years of mockery and humiliation, had helped reshape galactic civilization. He had shown that patience wasn't weakness, that preparation wasn't paranoia, and that quiet observation could be the deadliest weapon of all. As he entered his temporary quarters in New Boston, Jake received one more message. It was from former President Claire Hudson, now retired and living quietly on Earth. I'm watching the news. The Thorian Collective just accepted Council membership under the new terms. No restrictions, no subordination, just partnership. We did it, Jake. We actually changed things. Jake typed a simple response. We stayed quiet until it mattered. Then, we made sure our voice would never be silenced again. He looked out his window one last time before sleep. The stars shone bright and clear, and among them, humanity's ships kept watch. Earth had earned its place in the galaxy not through aggression or conquest, but through strength tempered with wisdom, power balanced with mercy. The Council had tested humanity's patience and learned the hard way that the quietest species are often the ones you should fear most. It was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come, and Earth, having finally spoken, would never be quiet again.